We're filming this evening for the Hamilton College Jazz Archive. It's a great pleasure to have Christian McBride join us after a hot set at the Sarasota Jazz Festival. I'm going to make a guess from listening to your answer machine a couple times trying to reach you that jazz was not your only influence when you were growing up.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
You're referring to the scream
Yeah.
you hear
Yeah.
when my answer machine picks up the scream of James Brown.
Right.
Everyone seems to get awakened by that.
The first time I heard it. Wow.
James is my main man. You know, growing up in Philadelphia in the 70s, that's what the hot thing was in Philadelphia, Philly soul. So,
Yeah.
and of course my parents, you know, listen. My father is a bass player, and he played on R&B circuit in the 70s. So that's definitely as much a part of me as is jazz.
Was in your blood, and in your is it your great uncle also plays bass?
That's right.
Wow.
So it's destined.
Yeah. You can tell your musical influences just from the set you picked to play. You didn't have much time, but you put in quite a group of things there.
Oh, thank you. It was rough. I was getting nervous for a minute.
Seeing that audience.
Seeing the audience, and I kept looking at the clock. You know, my head just going back and forth. Yeah. And tonight marks the debut of Joey Calderazzo as a member of the band. So I was listening to Joey, watching the audience, and watching the clock at the same time. So it was rough.
Yeah. Well, your James Brown step came off pretty well. You know, I think it's I like the way you talk to the audience, and I think it's something that a lot of musicians don't have. I think it's important.
Well, you know, I've always believed that presentation is just as important as the music sounding good. I mean, because, people like it when you try to communicate to them and try to explain to them what's going on, and you know, they like that. So that draws them into the music even more. I mean, if the music is, the music has to be good first and foremost. I mean, if the music is not happening, it doesn't mean anything. But when the music is sounding good, and you know, verbally try to communicate to the audience, they really appreciate that.
Right. This album has some great things on it. It was wonderful to see Milt Hinton and Ray Brown. That must have been quite a thrill to do.
Well, fortunately, it wasn't a complete surprise, because we actually played together before we did the album, so I kind of knew what to expect. I mean, Ray is more or less my godfather, so Ray and I have been close for so long, and Milt Hinton is such a wonderful man. They made me feel completely comfortable at my sessions.
Do you write your tunes from the piano? Because as I was walking down the hall to find you, I heard this pretty mean piano, and there you were behind it.
Well, more than half of the tunes that I've written tend to start on the piano, just because I've always been influenced by piano players and saxophone players. So on the piano, I get to see and just hear the whole orchestra where the harmonies and the chords are going. So most of the time, they tend to start on the piano. But there have been a couple of songs that I've written that started on the bass.
What is the state of jazz in New York for you right now? It seems pretty healthy?
Well, you know, a friend of mine said something that was very true. You have to move to New York to work out of New York.
Oh. Once you get there, you find yourself going elsewhere.
So in the last few years now, I've been, you know, pretty much road running, which is great. I mean, that's what I've always wanted to do my whole life, and I thank God for it. But, you know, I usually when I'm in New York these days is, you know, when I'm home doing a few recording sessions, or, you know, just catching up on bills and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah. Well, in a span of a few years, you've been with some pretty good bands. You moved
Fortunately.
How did all that happen?
Let's see. I first met Wynton Marsalis when I was 14 years old. He came to Philadelphia to do a workshop with the local Philadelphia high school students. And, you know, Winton was like a mentor for all of the young high school students. However, I was probably one of the only ones that had all of his albums and knew every song off all of those albums. So I tried to impress him by playing a song off of the record. Well, I can't remember which one it was, but I caught him. And from that point on, he became like my big brother. I mean, he used to go so far as to call my teachers at school to make sure I was getting good grades. So Winton definitely was someone that I needed. Winton is someone that everyone needs in their life, especially when you're that young, you know. Have a mentor like that to take you under their wing and just set you straight.
Yeah, keep you on the right track.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then after meeting Winton, I met his brother Branford, and I met Bobby Watson. I had a chance to meet a lot of great musicians as they came through Philadelphia to do different workshops. There's an annual workshop that goes on, a jazz festival rather, that goes on in Philadelphia every year, sponsored by Mellon Bank and the Mellon Jazz Festival. Every year, before they have the big gala concert, they have all of the players come and do workshops for the high school students. So I had a chance to meet and play with like Red Rodney and Kenny Barron, Curtis Fuller, Jimmy Heath, Walter Davis Jr., and I first met Ron Carter with the Mellon Jazz Festival. So I mean, that festival had brought a lot of high school students who wanted to go, in touch with these musicians. And that was fantastic, because I mean, like I said, you need that when you're that young.
Did you start out on acoustic?
No.
You started on
electric. I started on electric bass. And then I started to play the acoustic bass when I was 11. I started going to junior high school. So ever since then, I still pretty much do a juggling act. The gigs that I've had in the last few years never called for electric bass, so I just never had a chance to play it in public. So a lot of people forgot that I still play electric bass, because I used to play with a band. Everyone forgets about this. I only did a few gigs with it, but I used to play in this fusion band called Free Flight. The flute player named Jimmy Walker and Mike Garson, the piano player, and Alex Acuna played drums. And that group was more or less like, kind of a Weather Report-ish type group. And I played some electric bass in Joshua Redman's band. So on the new album, which is coming out in a few days, I'm playing electric bass on some of it, just to keep the chops nice and greased up.
Well, with your father playing rhythm and blues, and you being a James Brown fan, how was it that you got an interest in, Stars Fell on Alabama, for instance?
My great uncle, the bass player, he's the man in the family that had all the albums. So when he discovered that I was taking acoustic bass lessons in junior high school, he was so happy. He brought me over a big stack of albums to listen to. He said, well, now that you're playing the acoustic bass, I want you to listen to these records. So the one record that was in there that changed my life forever was the Massey Hall concert with Bird and Dizzy, Bud Powell, Charles Mingus, and Max Roach. And the group sound of that record. Because I mean, we're talking like 1984, so I was into Prince and Michael Jackson, everything that was hot at that time. And I still listened to that, as well as checking out Bird and Miles, and it was a different kind of energy, but the joy and the feeling was still there. So fortunately, I was able to latch on to it, And then I heard bass players like Ron Carter and Paul Chambers, and I said, man, so that's how this instrument is supposed to be played.
Is it more of a physical challenge to play the acoustic bass?
I think being as young and naive as I was at the age of 11, I wasn't aware of the level of intimidation I should have had, at that time. I just thought of it as being an oversized electric bass. So when I went to junior high school, I just said, oh, well, I'll just do what I do at home. I didn't realize of, the switch that I should have been thinking about. But I think in that case, it worked in my favor. Because I wasn't scared of it.
I hope you didn't have one of those typical junior high instruments where the The strings are, 2 inches off the
Oh,
fret.
yeah.
Yeah.
Of course. Fiberglass.
Yeah.
And a fiberglass bass.
Right. Well, you must have developed a lot of strength.
Man,
Boy.
you had to.
When you came, you got a chance to do your own record, and you sit down and you say, now, this is important. What's going to go on this?
Yeah.
So you kind of balanced your own originals with some classic
Yeah.
standards.
Well, I purposely tried to wait as long as I possibly. I tried to pick the time where I said, okay, well, the time is right now, because I actually had a chance to do my first record maybe 6 years ago when this quote-unquote Young Lions craze started to happen.
Yeah.
When Roy Hargrove and Antonio Hart, all of us, pardon me, came on the scene together. And as you well know, record companies started making it a hot commodity, so they were just handing out record contracts just because guys were under 21. And I didn't want to be a part of that because I had already had a chance to be around really serious musicians like Wynton and Branford and Bobby Watson, and I see the effort and the sweat and the grit that they put into making their music, and I just know going into the studio making a quick record, a quick sad record, wouldn't be good for the legacy of the music. So I said, well, I just want to be able to play with as many different people as I can and get more experience. So when it comes time for me to make my record, I'll have I'll know what I'm doing to some extent.
That's a great attitude, I think. Who were some of the horn players that caught your ear when you got into jazz?
Freddie Hubbard. Freddie Hubbard was probably my biggest non-bass influence as far as writing, as far as improvising. I first heard Freddie's CTI records like Red Clay and all that stuff. And I heard the records he made with Art Blakey. Then I heard his Blue Note records. And then when I saw him in person, I'll never forget, I almost passed out because I'd never seen anyone play with that much. And that was my first time actually witnessing a jazz musician with that much fire play in person. And I remember I almost fell over in my chair. And from that point on, I said, I want to play with Freddie Hubbard. And it's amazing how fate happens because Carl Allen was in the band at that time. And Carl Allen and I became best friends, and we started working with Benny Green. Actually, I started working with Freddie first. I moved to New York in 1989, and Carl knew how bad I wanted to play with Freddie. And their bass player was about to leave the band, so Carl, I was still going to Juilliard at the time, and Carl said, "Hey man, you want to make this gig with Freddie in South Carolina?" I said, "What? Yes." So I joined Freddie's band, and I stayed in his band for about 2.5, 3 years, and that was probably the most memorable musical experience I've had in my life.
You got your education
right
there. That's fabulous. You doing one of his tunes on your next record, right?
That's right. I did Little Sunflower. And not only because it's a great tune, but the way I did it on the album, this is a little different. I did some multi-layering and overdubs. So when you hear Little Sunflower, you hear 4 acoustic basses and 1 electric bass. And Mino Sanelu's playing percussion. And I just thought that Little Sunflower would be a perfect song to lend itself for bass and percussion. And I hope Freddie likes it.
I hope he does too.
Yeah, I'm sure he will.
Yeah.
I think I know what he likes and what he doesn't.
Tell us about the new record coming out in just a few days.
Yeah, the new record's called Number 2 Express, and I'm so excited. I'm so excited because the new album represents me where I am now, musically. Things I like to listen to and things I like to go for and the things that I would like to have, eventually have the band get into. I've always been about diversity. You can't be in just one bag. And I try to make a conscious effort for my band to play, lots of blues, some progressive stuff, maybe some things leaning toward funk, and then playing all the standards, covered all the areas because, the legacy of jazz is so huge. You just can't stick with one part of it. And especially the general public's ignorance level towards jazz is so high, you have to let them hear more than one bag, so they'll know what it's all about. And you know, I on the new album I have Chick Corea playing acoustic and electric piano, and one of the best things about that was him and Jack DeJohnette got to play together again, because Jack is on the album also, and they hadn't worked together. They told me they've maybe played together maybe 3 or 4 times since 1969, and it was such a thrill for me to have them record on my new CD. And Kenny Garrett is on it as well, playing alto saxophone. And then the other half of the album, Gary Bartz playing alto saxophone, Steve Nelson is playing vibes, Kenny Barron's playing piano, and Jack is on drums. And we're really stretching out. See, on my first album, Getting To It, it was really a rootsy type of album. You know, I see recording as a tree. You know, you make your first album, those are your roots, and each album, something grows out of that. So the second record is different from the first record, and you know, the third record probably, I'm sure, will be different from the second, and so forth and so on.
Yeah.
So, you know, evolution.
Really, you've got Night Train on there. That was, I said, all right, Night Train. You know, a classic blues thing. I was wondering, like, how's he gonna do this? And it's like just bass, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, every time I think about how I did it, I get tired. Because I did the same thing on the new album as I did on Getting To It. You know, the producer said, well, you know, why don't you feature yourself on something, you know, just unaccompanied bass. I said, well, sometimes this is not a good habit. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, but I tend to wait till the last minute to do some things.
Yeah.
You know, things get so backed up, you know, sometimes I don't get to things till the last minute. So I didn't really think of an arrangement for myself till maybe 2 days before I was supposed to go into the studio. So the producers kept saying, well, you know, what do you got? What do you got? I said, it's a surprise, I'll tell you. So coming the day of the session, they said, oh, I remember how it happened. Getting To It took 3 days. So we figured we would knock all of the ensemble stuff out on the first 2 days, and I'd do my solo piece and the stuff with Ray Brown and Mel Hinton on the last day. The session went so smoothly, everything, the bulk of the album was finished after the first day.
Just like the old times.
Right. So they said, well, look, Christian, you have all this time. Why don't you do your solo now? I said, can I wait, please? They said, no, why don't you do it today? I said, okay. So I took my bass in the back, and I said, give me about 20 minutes. So I figured out this arrangement, the Night Train, on the spur of the moment. And it really takes a lot of energy. I really backed myself up into a jam, because sometimes people, like, you know, they ask me to play it in person. That takes a lot of energy, man.
How many takes did it take?
I did 3 takes. Yeah, that had my heart beating fast, and I was sweating and carrying on. And the same thing happened on the new album when I did Little Sunflower, because, you know, once again they said, well, you know, what's your bass feature going to be? I said, oh, you'll see. But once again, it worked out.
You've got some good-looking things in your future. I see playing with some notable people coming up.
Yeah, well, actually, I'll be touring with Chick Corea this summer. He's putting together a tribute to Bud Powell. We're going to go out with a group, and we're going to play pretty much all Bud Powell music. And the band consists of myself, Roy Haynes is playing drums, Wallace Roney's playing trumpet, Joshua Redman's going to do most of the tour, but Kenny Garrett is going to play saxophone on a few concerts. So I'm really looking forward to playing with Chick this summer. That's going to be a blast. And then also I'll be touring with Kathleen Battle at the end of the year. And that'll be interesting, because I had a chance to work with Kathleen on her latest, I guess it's her latest CD on the Sony Classics label, on which she did a lot of, it was very different. It turned out to be a great project. She did some Brazilian music, some spiritual, some stuff that's which he said was not strictly classical. So I played on it. Cyrus Chestnut played piano. James Carter played saxophones. Grover Washington. And turned out to be a really marvelous project. So we're going to do a few concerts at the end of the year with that.
Yeah.
And so between Chick and Kathleen, I'll be touring with my band.
Quite a schedule. Do you have any time to practice?
Got to practice while you're out.
Yeah, Miles said you practice on the gig,
That's right. That's right.
Wow. This has been really fascinating. I
Yes,
appreciate you joining us. And
anytime.
our viewers don't know, but it's what, about 12:30 at night right now?
Yes.
Someday we'll have to hook you up with a good friend of ours at Hamilton, is Joe Williams. And
Yes.
he has actually mentioned your name a couple times. And
You kidding?
I think so.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, man.
So
That's good news.
yeah, we hope to.
I had a chance to work with him once at the White House. They had the 40th anniversary of the Newport Jazz Festival. That was a huge event. It was on public television stations, and Joe Williams was there, and Clark Terry, Wynton Marsalis, John Lewis, Herbie Hancock, Bobby McFerrin, Bill Clinton played saxophone on All Blues. It's funny.
Man, oh man.
Yeah.
And you were there?
Yeah,
Oh man.
that was a thrill.
That's one for the scrapbook, I guess.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. It's interesting, just wrap this up, but it seems sometimes your listening tastes in music, I'm talking generally, sometimes to work backwards. Like, you know, you start out with a certain thing and then you find out where that went. Where'd that come from? And where'd that come from?
Yeah. Well, that's, like I said, evolution. You know, that's what happens. You know, the natural evolution of your ideas happens from things that happened before then and before that and before that. You know, so we'll see what happens in the future.
Yeah.
The biggest thing I'm planning for right now is I'm actually already planning my third album. As you know, and as I've said earlier, James Brown has always been my childhood hero, and it would be the dream of a lifetime to record with James Brown. But I would think, you know, how, you know, because it would be too easy to just get a funk band and just do covers. You know, that's too easy.
Right.
I said, well, you know, James Brown has always said how much jazz has influenced his music. You know, people like Jimmy Smith and Horace Silver, Les McCann. So I thought about doing a jazz album with James Brown and doing like some pop standards. Because even during his heyday in the 60s, he was singing songs like That's Life, I Want to Be Around, Kansas City. You know, so we'll see what happens.
Sounds like a good concept.
Yeah.
Well, I want to wish you luck with your next album, and
Thank you.
if it does as good as this one,
Well, we'll
you
see.
know, you're thanks so much for joining us on Hamilton College. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank
Hope
you
you have a
very
safe
much.
trip back tomorrow, and all your plans this summer go real well.
Thank you very much. Hope to come and visit the college soon.
That would be nice.
Beautiful.
All right.
Thanks.